Now then guys, so this video is going to walk you through the preparation of your track bike. Not the setup, not the suspension and all that sort of stuff, just the prep, making sure that it's safe, functional and will last. So in the description I'm going to link to a service log. One of the things that tends to happen with a track bike is obviously they get overlooked because it's just not used from autumn till spring. We tend to change the oil, maybe put some tyres on, tweak it a little bit, and that's it. We don't touch it, and things like the brake fluid gets forgotten. So download that, print it off or use it digitally for each of your bikes or your track bike, and that'll come in really handy, I promise you. So I'll start you off quick, won't mess around, and go through some of the tools and a bit of the pre-preparation before you actually get into this job and what you're going to do. So first things first, if you're looking at this video you've probably already got a few tools, so I'll run through this pretty quick. So first is a torque wrench. This is a big torque wrench, 30 to 210 Newton meters, really good for your axle, swing arm, etc. The big heavy duty nuts. You need a torque wrench. Here's a smaller one. I use Draper because they're just very good for the budget. If you want to spend money on Snap-on, obviously it's probably as good as you're going to get, but these are really good for the price. Get a good socket set. You're going to need some Allens, and obviously then another thing in terms of the sockets, most socket sets don't have a spindle nut, whatever you want to call that, and also big sockets. I think you're going to need up to 32 mil. I think the top nut on it is 32 mil, and there's a few others that require the bigger sockets. Once you've got that, that's kind of the basic tools out of the way. Some of the more advanced stuff that I recommend getting is a feeler gauge. This is so you can gap your spark plugs if you're doing the spark plugs. All it is just different thicknesses of metals, so that's a feeler gauge. A vernier caliper. This one's called a digital caliper, it's a vernier caliper. That's for measuring the thickness of things. So if you've got a slip-on exhaust, you want to measure the diameter of them, that's really useful. But for this, we'd be using it for measuring the thickness of our discs, making sure that they're within tolerance. Well, not an advanced tool, I've overlooked this one, is depth gauge for the tyres and PSI. It also does bar. Try and get two of these if you can. I have a bicycle foot pump. I also have a compressor. I'm getting a bit old now, so I'm starting to collect a couple of tools. And the making sure that you're getting accurate pressures is really critical. So if you go to the tyre guy on the track day, which I promise you must do, and say what pressure should I be running for my particular tyres, and he says 26, and your gauge reads 28 when he's put the pressure in for you, you know that your gauge is off by 2. Check it on your other gauge and you can get a rough idea, you can calibrate, let's say. Getting a bit more tech, multimeter for the battery, I'll show you how to use that. These are really cheap and pretty easy to pick up if you're not into electrics, so I recommend getting one of those, learning how to use the basics. Oil filter wrench, and critical, get yourself not just a Haynes, a service manual or the actual manual that comes with your bike, because you're going to need to know torque specs. Haynes are good, but they're not the best, I won't lie. There's some things in here that I've disagreed with in the past. The service manual is always the best, but for some reason every website that sells them looks like they're going to take your money and run, so hey, and you've got to print the fuckers off, which I like a book. Okay, so that's some of the tools and the hardware. Some other things is I use a spray bottle and I put oil in because it's really useful for certain things, and it's free. You don't have to buy one of the juice or whatever they call them, the oil cans that tend to fire out so much anyway. Get yourself some grease. I use Polaris grease. This is supposed to go in a grease gun, but I just dip in a screwdriver and use that. I also have bearing grease and stuff like that. Any grease is really good for the levers. There's a lot of different areas you'll see. And then this fantastic stuff, ACF 50. Not cheap, but I've had this for years. You don't use much. This is a corrosion, anti-corrosion, but it stops corrosion and prevents corrosion. Really good on things like metal brake lines, connectors on your calipers, or bolts, all sorts. Really, really good. For a track bike where you're going to be putting things on and off often, the bolts need to be in good condition. They don't want to be crusted up. There doesn't want to be a lot of friction because you're going to wear them out fast. Beyond that, you might want to buy some spares for certain bits. So you might want spare levers. If you're just getting into track days, I promise you want a lever or two. They're cheap, and if you fall off, that's the first thing to go. Brake levers tend to go, but you can bodge those with a few bolts and things. you'll probably learn as you go a few other bits. Right, so let's get into it. What we're going to do is going to go through the service log in the description that I described front to back, and we're going to pretty much touch everything on the bike and make sure it is perfect. And the next time I go out on this bike, I can give it death without it causing my death. So front tyre, this one is in good shape, let's say. So obviously you're going to check the tread. The markings on the side of the tyre, there's a little oval that usually tells you what year it was made. You don't want tyres that are too old because they get brittle as they go on. Check for cracks, check the full circumference of the tyre, make sure it's clean and consistent. And one of the things you can do with the tyre is read it to understand how the bike's performing. So this looks really clean, as in these very slight ripples you can see, they're even all the way around, which means the suspension setup for this bike, whoever's been on it before, is pretty good. There isn't any raised edges in the tread, which means the rebound and damping, etc. haven't been set up too aggressive. It's not waving in and out. It's also not really thick, so there aren't such a things as cold tears or hot tears, which usually means, again, the suspension's either too hard or the tyre pressure's too high or low, depending on what you're getting. So the tyre's a really good source of information. Also, have a quick check of your rim. Sometimes you can get cracks and stuff in the rims. Obviously, stress fractures and things like that, they do happen over time, so check, make sure you're happy with everything there. Right, so next is the front axle bolt or nut. You have two pinch bolts here, two clamps, and then the main one. So first things first is we need to loosen those off. That one's really loose, should be a bit tighter than that. They're not that tight, these, but that's more like it. So get them nice and loose, look, finger loose. Now the torque setting for this is 100 Newton meters, so I want to make sure we're dead on there. That is 100. Is it there? There we go, 100. And all we do is make sure we're gripping it perfect. We want the point that we're pivoting on to be exactly in line with the nut. There we go. So that turned a little. Then the pinch bolts, I believe, are 23 front axle clamp bolts and axle holder clamp bolts, 23 Newton. So I need the smaller torque wrench for that. 10, 22, 3. I'm going to tighten them up with this to begin with. There we go. .23 is reasonably tight, tighter than sort of hand tight, so I can go in on them a little bit now. Again, pivot point, handle. There we go. Done. Right, so while I'm down here as well, it's the wheel bearings. Now that that's all tight, I can check these. So basically, just give it a wiggle and try and turn the bike. I mean, I shouldn't really have it in this, but I know what it feels like. You get a very subtle, like clink, clink, clink. And also, if you get the bike on the front axle stands, then spin the wheel, give it a very gentle move. Be careful with the front axle stands; they're not as sturdy as they look. Any resistance, any grinding, any movement, new wheel bearings. Not a difficult job, but can be really fucking frustrating. These are fine, no movement whatsoever. Right, so the next thing we're going to look at is the brake pad. I'll also measure the caliper while I'm here. So this is one of the tools I mentioned at the start called a vernier caliper. Let's just see what we've got there. 5.5 it came up at when I squeezed it. Also make sure there isn't a lip. Check to make sure there's nothing on there that looks wrong, like pitting. If you've turned it blue, etc., that could mean it's warped. You probably know that since the last time you went out. Just have a good visual check and make sure everything's okay there. And then the pads. Now, pads have wear indicators on them. These lines are essentially there to show you that when the lines have gone, you're out of braking material, pad material. So you can see usually that they get filled up with a little bit of shit. You might want to clean that out if that's the case. But as soon as you get close to these, get them changed. You don't want to run out of material. You don't necessarily have brake failure, but the brakes can be really snatchy and you'll just lose the front end. But anyway, let me show you how we check the pads. So all you do is get under there, have a look. You can see on pretty much every bike. So one of the things I forgot to mention about the brake thickness is the actual limit. On the front in the manual it says 5, but you don't need the manual for that. It'll tell you somewhere on the disc which says min 5. The rare is 4.5, and here it also tells you the standard thickness is 5.3 to 5.7 millimeters. So there you go. One other thing that's worth checking while you're here is the disc mounting bolts torque. These very rarely come loose. Very rarely. I've never had any issues with these, but let's give them a little check. And these are 23 Newton meters, and that's pretty standard across most. Yeah. So I'm going to whip through the ones I can see. Check the other side, I'll do the others. Obviously the thickness you got to measure on both sides, all the pads, bada bing, bada boom, all good. Caliper mounting bolts. Loose. There you go, glad I checked that one. The bottom one was actually really loose. Got to do the other side. Done. Both of those are okay. But what I have seen doing the inspections is that the actual mud flap, these two brackets at the back, are both cracked. That's quite common because there's a lot of vibration going through this. What that means is this has got to come off. That's too dangerous, too dangerous. If these come off and shatter, if the brake lines hit the tyre, etc., problem. So I'll do another video about how to repair that. That's an easy fix. Brake fluid. Got lower and upper, obviously make sure it's between the two. Generally you want it as high as possible because you don't want any air getting towards this tube. I'm going to replace this fluid because I don't know how long it's been in. Another one for the service log, make sure you know how old your brake fluid is. The older it gets, the more moisture it gets in there. The older bikes used to be able to see this stuff seep out, newer bikes not so much. Like you see the socks on it, back in the day I believe they helped stop what they call the sweating. Nowadays it's just for looks. But yeah, changing the brake fluid is quite easy. I'll show you how to do that. Essentially all you're doing is pushing it through. I connect a syringe, pull it out, top up, pull top until it's clear coming out of the bottom. Done. It means you don't have to bleed it. But I've also noticed these are a bit spongy. I'm not happy with that. I like my levers really close to the handlebar because it's just preference. But look at that, it's ridiculous. That's almost all the way out. If I notch this back in, I'm touching the handlebar, so that's piss, that's shit. So I'll cover that in another video because that's a fairly long-winded process, but we're just checking, we're making a note, so that goes on the log. I'll make a note of that. Got to do that, not a problem. Front brake master cylinder mounting bolts, essentially the brake lever, 10 Newton meters, which is not very tight. That's just nice, and yeah, you can do that almost by hand. Did I get a click? There we go. I'm just making sure I got a click on that one. That's more like it. Ta-da! Right. Lever bolt, whatever it's called. Now, I've checked this one. This is actually finger loose. Oh, very loose, let's say. Look at that, really bad. That's a big worry. So, you know, look look at that, that's not good. So that's why I'm really thankful I actually do these checks, because younger me would not have done this. I'd have just cracked on. There we go. Don't know what the torque setting is for that, but these bolts have a machined piece so that the nut clamps up against it without restricting this, so you can go fairly tight. There we go. Glad I checked that one. Right guys, I'm going to reshoot this one because I've had a bit of a camera issue, so the last video didn't work. So this is a job that often gets overlooked, and I don't know why, because it does make a real big difference. So first of all, undo this. There is a bolt underneath, 10mm. Take the lever off and lube the cable. You can buy a tool to lube it, but all you need is a little bit of oil. Just stick some oil in there, give it a few pumps when you put it back in and re-lube it. Then this bit here, lube the bit of the lever that is in here. You can see there where I've put the lube. Do the underside and do the inside of where this particular bolt goes. I use this Polaris stuff. I love it. It should be in a gun, but it's not. Stick a screwdriver in, paste it on. You can see where the friction is done. Then to adjust the gap or the amount of free play in the clutch, penny in there, tighten that up, take the penny out. That's about right. Tiny bit of free play in there. You don't really want any more than that. I could probably a little bit more. Yeah, that's probably a little bit better. Easy job, and it just makes everything feel so much smoother, so much smoother. Right, let's move on. So now, steering stem nut, this top one, it's 80 Newton meters on this one. Obviously referring to the manual. In. Now I've got the front wheel locked and everything. If you haven't, and you're on the paddock stands, do it. Put the bike down. A little bit of movement, but now I'm happy with that. Next. Right, so now I've done the top nut and everything else around it, I'm going to inspect the headset bearings. So that's pretty easy. We've got to take it off here. There we go. Put the front brake on. Just rock it forward and backwards now. Obviously the suspension's going to die, but we're not looking for that. We're looking for any rocking forward and backward here. You can usually feel it. I think we're okay there. Check for movement. And again, when you get it up on the stands, try and avoid doing anything like this because the front stands are terrible. Okay. Back there, there we go. Easy. So next it's the air filter. So I've got to take off the top of the airbox. When you do this, just make sure everything's pretty clean and there's nothing that's going to drop in, because if it does, you've got to fire around. If something drops in and you twist the throttle, it's going in the engine and you're going to have a bad time. Also, if you're doing this, set the torque settings on your drill to be quite low. You know, you don't want it so high that it's going to strip any of these if they're stuck. Right, so I wasn't expecting this, but we've got a BMC filter on here. Now these are, I believe, lifetime filters that you oil up. I don't normally go for these, I stick with the OEM ones. I find the oiling and messing around, they're a faff, and if you put too much oil on, you've worse performance. If you put not enough oil on, the shit goes in your engine. But really glad it's a BMC because these are very good. So steal the vacuum and don't tell the wife. And get cracking. So that was in good condition, so it didn't need too much. And make sure it's a very good seal over it. Perfect. Now this is the oil breather sponge filter. Not much you can do with this. You can give it a clean, but to be honest, if you've put too much oil in and you are at super high revs, that's where the oil tends to end up. Worth checking to make sure you don't have anything collected in there. If it looks like there's a hell of a lot of oil in, that's a little bit greasy, but it's okay. But if there's a lot in there, got to make sure you haven't put too much oil in. Now, common problem that you see on some bikes, this seems to go on really well. Suzuki's generally have a good fitment. Honda not so much. BMW even worse, is the clamp between the filter and the housing. And you've got to make sure there's a good seal there. If you've got an S1000RR, I feel sorry for you because that's the worst design ever. But that's obviously why the bike is so good, because they've pushed the envelope. The CBR and another one, a little bit of a nuance to get it comfortable. Once you know you've got a good seal, you can start tightening up. Now, if you tighten this up, start at the middle and do a star shape, so essentially opposites, and don't do two bolts next to each other. Job done. Next, so engine oil. Make sure you're on a level surface, and I think you have to hold the bike around the middle. For most bikes, it's very rare that it's on the stand and stuff like that. Obviously, track bikes don't usually have a stand. This bike, I think, is slightly over. If I hold it, I think it is. And the reason for that is this bike's on a bit of a this garage is on a bit of an angle. So I'll check that when it's flat. But obviously, check the side glass, make sure it's where you think it should be. Oil filters next. Now, filter on this one looks to be in good nick. The guy who bought it off said he just changed the oil. The oil looks to be in good nick, so I've no reason to dispute that. Normally I would change, but because I tend to do this after a track day anyway, and the oil isn't black, it looks clear, even if the filter's dirty, I'm okay with that. I'm going to do a track day on it and then I'll change it. But one thing you can see is this has been lock wired. That's really, really good to do. Stops it coming off, stops you having a disaster with any oil coming off. Right, what is next? So inspect the brake lines. Now, these are braided, so they last a little bit longer than the rubber ones, but you are essentially checking for wear. Top of the top, making sure that all looks good, it's not corroded. I think the routing of these is wrong. I'm going to have to go do a little bit of research and check. Coming down, checking the whole cable. See, I don't like that that's there, that's going to rub, that's going to cause problems, I think, so I've got to sort that out. And I'll do that on another chance I get. Again, we're just checking everything, make sure it's all okay. Looks good to me. Check the other side. Yeah, looks good. Just the routing, that's all. So I'll sort that out. And then we'll go to the back and do the same. And now, can't really see too much on there, but I can see that nut's a little bit corroded. So all I'll do is I'll brush that up, have a big check. The routing on this one looks fine. Down here, bit of a dirty caliper. Other than that, the actual cable and everything looks really good. Cool. Next. So fuel hoses. If your tank's on and you've never taken a tank off before, it's actually really easy. The more modern the bike, the easier. The older, they tend to have clips and Jubilee clips, and they are a little bit of a pain. Take the front bolts off and you should be able to pivot it up quite high, and most bikes in the toolkit will have a long piece of like a rod with a round ring on it. Put that through on the stem nut, do a bolt hole in the tank, it'll hold it up for you so you can check. Now these are overflows, you want to make sure those are okay, no cracking, no issues there, those look good. And then the entry pipe here, which is a metal pipe on this bike, we're just checking that, making sure there's no issues, checking the fuel rail, make sure there's nothing wrong there, nothing loose. All looks good. Surprisingly common that. Now the fuel tank side, my tanks are for painting, so I'm not going to go drag you outside, but I will check that hose. And all we're looking for is damage, cracking, etc. If there's any damage, order a brand new and get it sorted out. You can buy a fuel hose as well, but with these quick connections, you're better off just buying the one you need from the manufacturer. Yeah, surprisingly common, that one. I've had it on the Fireblade a couple of times, which is an old 97, granted, but yeah, pain in the arse, that one. So we've got rear brake fluid level. This, I think, is just under the upper mark there, but it's hard to tell because there's a fair bit of yellowing. I'm replacing this fluid, so I'll come back and check. If you can't see, give it all a clean and shine a torch in it. You'll be able to see it dead easy, but that's okay. So, rear brake pads. Quite hard to see on this one, so get a torch and have a good look. Exactly the same process as the front. Look for the lines, see how much meat's left on the pad. Both sides, make sure you're good. Tough to see, but that's okay. Right, battery voltage. So, get your multimeter, turn it to the 20 multiplier, essentially put the decimal in the right place. Get your probes. Black neutral, red positive, and see what reading you get. I'm getting 13.14. That's a healthy battery. Now this battery lives on a tender, an optimizer, an oximizer, depending on what you buy. If your voltage is lower than 12.8, charge it and monitor it and see what happens. If it's constantly dropping down, I think if you go below 12.5, there's a problem with your battery. If you're charging it as well, don't just put it on a really high, fast charge rate. These batteries like to be eased in, like a fine woman. Once it's been charged for a day or two, probably overnight is best at a low rate. If you have an intelligent charger, they'll manage it all for you. And they're about 20-30 quid, brand new, so they're not breaking the bank, and they will save you a fortune long term, because batteries don't last long. These little ones don't. See what happens, give it a go. If your voltage is holding, your battery's okay. If it keeps dropping, you need a new battery. Get one, get one, get one. I see loads of people on track days, done. And then what happens is when you're bumping the bike off, the bike will run. But if you're having any subtle issues with the bike, if you cut it out or anything, you're fucked. You're fucked, and you've spent a fortune on your track day. So don't skimp on this. One other thing to check, and I'm not going to go into electrics in too much detail because I hate them and it's a voodoo art. Make sure your earths, first of all the terminals are clean, but make sure all your earths, wherever they go, are clean, rust free, and give a good connection. So you want to check a couple of points. Now, your starter motor will have a live to it and will have some points on the engine where it's earthed. This earth goes down there to the engine case. Just check and make sure they're clean. A good earth means a good, healthy electrical system. Your reg rectifier, things like that, tidy things up and rely on a good earth. So just make sure you maintain them, make them clean. That's where ACF 50 will come in. If you do have a problem, take them off, give them a good scrub with a wire brush so that they're shiny, clean. Put them back together, spray them with ACF 50. You're all right. Job done. Next. So the rear tyre, we're going to do exactly what we did with the front. We're going to visually check it all. Now if this is on a paddock stand, you can obviously rotate it. Just because I'm moving around the bike and I'm giving it a good shake, I've got it in the front wheel chock. I prefer that, I won't lie. It's just safer. So check, do a bit of a tyre read again, make sure that everything looks like it's working alright. If you've got any raised bits on here, any uneven patterns, etc., any cracking, any problems, you want to make sure you're well aware of that before you go in 150 mile an hour down the straight and it causes you anything severe. Check obviously the rim as well, as I said. Anything, just a visual check, any cracks. All looks good. One thing I didn't mention about the front is the tyre valves. Make sure the tyre valves are in good nick as well, because those are a common area of weakness. Side angle valves are best if you can get them, because they just save you a lot of hassle. Then we have got a little mark there, but I think that's just from the bike moving. And I'm pretty happy with that, pretty happy. And then obviously the wheel bearings, give that a check. So what I'm going to do is hold the bike, I'm just going to try and twist it. That's okay. So there's movement, but that's the swing arm. There needs to be a little bit of flex, but there's not any clink, clink, clinks. Get it up on the paddock stand, give it a roll, make sure it moves freely. When we do the chain, we're probably going to have to do that anyway. Okay. Next. Right, so another one is the oil sump bolt slash for oil leaks. Right, so another one is the oil sump bolt slash checking for oil leaks. Now, I haven't touched this bike, and here you can see there's a little drip. Hopefully you get a bit of a good angle on there. So what do you do about that? Now, oil leaks are notoriously difficult. That one's going to be simple, it's going to be the sump bolt, but you don't want to just over tighten the sump bolt. It could be a couple of things really there, so I'll monitor it. That's all I'm going to do. I'm going to wipe it away. Make sure it's nice and clean, and then I'll just see what happens. That bolt looks like it's come off and been on a few times. It's a bit worn around the edges. I always replace the bolt. You don't have to, but I always do. There's a squash washer or a copper washer that goes on those. Always replace that, never reuse the washer. Some bikes have a rubber O-ring, and I again recommend you always replace them. They're so cheap, it's not worth the effort if it does leak. So I'm going to keep an eye on that and see what happens. If it keeps leaking, I'm going to undo it, drain all the oil out into a clean, brand spanking new glass jug. I like glass because it's really easy to clean oil out of. And then I'm going to replace the nut altogether, and I'm going to refill the oil. Same oil, don't have to change it, and then see what happens. If it's still leaking, we've got to do a lot more in-depth checking, which is not really for this video, but it could be lots of things. Usually it's a gasket where you've fallen off and something's not seating right. A couple of other options, but that's really it. Okay, so chain, stretch, tension, overall appearance. I don't have the tool for the chain stretch, so I should buy one. But the tension is really easy. So get a ruler, a tape measure, anything, something to measure. The tolerance on this, or allowable tolerance, is between 20 and 30 millimeters, 2 and 3 centimeters. So put my tape measure on the floor, put my screwdriver in. My screwdriver's at about 6.5 centimeters there. So when I stretch this, can go up to 3.5. Any less than 3.5 centimeters means I'm out of tolerance. So just on. Got a little bit, a couple of millimeters there. I do like my chains on the looser side as well. If your chain is too tight, so if you go within the 2 to 3 mil range, perfect. If you're out of the 2 mil and it's a lot tighter, all that means is your suspension probably can't compress as full as it should, especially on track. And if you're somewhere aggressive, like Cablo Park's got a fucking jump in it, what that means is when you are compressing the swing arm, it cannot go through the full range of motion of the shock. When essentially this locks out because the chain's not allowing it to move, you are then left with suspension in the tyre. No, we don't want that, so make sure that's right. Obviously just assess overall quality. Now this section here is where the chain's been joined. I'll try and do a close-up for you. That's well worth checking as well. If it's been done by a professional, excellent. If you've done it yourself, these not difficult, but they can be a weak point, so always worth a check. This chain needs a good clean, so I've got to do that. Obviously I'll do that when it's on the paddock stands. Right, sprocket. Okay, so the sprocket. These are good teeth. You'll know if your teeth are worn because they start to look like a wave. Like this. Bad sprocket. Very, very bad sprocket. Don't let your sprocket get like this. This isn't mine, this came with the bike. So yeah. Good sprocket. Bad sprocket. Good sprocket. Bad. So, rare sprocket bolts. These are critical ones to tighten up, and especially if you've got a belt drive bike. This is 60 Newton meters. Should be going in a star pattern, to be honest. But rare axle nut, 100 Newton meters, and this is a 36mm socket. Right, so next we're going to do the spark plugs. Another job that gets overlooked, but it is a little bit faffy. Tank needs to come off. Luckily I've already done that, but I promise you that's a really easy job that people don't like doing, especially with these quick release connectors nowadays. So, time to get the airbox off. Now, first things first, we've got to remove, I think that's just a breather hose. This is the intake air pressure sensor, which is a connector where you push the tab down. Gets confusing with all these different ones. Some you push, some you pull. Give that a squeeze down, and you should just pull off. Any connector is really difficult. You're just not pushing it down hard enough. Generally, these are rarely connectors that get seized on. Intake air temperature sensor. Another one you squeeze. There we go. And then the PAIR tube. Right, then we've got to loosen up the clips on all the throttle bodies. And I think it's just that one in there, I'm not sure. No, it's not. There we go, oops, something else there. Intake air pressure tube, sorry. Nearly forgot that. There's something else. Ooh. No, there isn't. We're off. Right, so we have to take the coils off. Let's pull these off. If you have any issues with these and they're stuck, still be gentle. And just you can put a bit of WD in there. You don't want to break these. And obviously they should go back in the order that they come out. So if yours are not neatly wired up like that, label them 1, 2, 3, 4, or you know, whatever you decide. Right, once that's off, now getting spark plugs, you need a spark plug key, tool, whatever you want to call it, which is one of these. Spark plugs are something that often get over tightened. Now, if you can get these out, with a little bit of convincing, get the engine warm, spray some WD-40 and leave it a day, spray it in again, leave it another day, you know, whatever. Just don't go hell for leather on these because they can break. It's quite common. There we go, that was, you know, fairly loose. And again, this is another one of those where make sure it's clear, you don't want anything going down that hole. If it does, and the spark plug key, it's a cheap tool, well worth getting, has a rubber grommet in it that will grab the plug as well for you. And I'll share one of my top tips in putting these back in, because getting them in is more difficult than getting them out. There we go, unplug. Right, so spark plugs. Now, this is the one out of the bag. This is the one out of my Suzuki. So as you can see, this is a lot darker. That means something I can't remember. I won't lie. If you Google them, I'm sure you'll be able to tell. It's usually overfueling, underfueling, oil deposits, something along those lines. So it could mean there's something wrong with this engine. This is an iridium plug, so it has a much smaller tip. So if that's the case, don't panic on yours. That's normal. One thing I will say though is with these, checking the distance of the diode and the electrodes, the insulator, which is the whiter bit in the middle, just make sure it's all there, it's not cracked, there's no damage. And then I'm also going to show you how to gap these. I'm going to do that for all three. Right, so I've had a battery change in the camera, I'm having a charge. And I'm going to gap the spark plug. So you use the feeler gauge. The setting for this is 0.07 to 0.08 millimeters. These dual electrode ones are, I'll be honest, unpleasant to adjust. So I'm hoping that is just right, and that is just right. just. So repeat that all along. Now, the bit in the middle of diode electrode fuck nose is fragile, brittle. So if you are adjusting these, you've got to be careful. That's why I don't like these twin electrode bullshit ones. I prefer the old-fashioned with the arm that you can actually bend. So my tip that I was going to give you is, now when you put these back in, you want to be really careful not to put any pressure on this. So obviously what you'd think you'd do is put that in there, stick it in and start spinning. You can do that if you are very gentle, but I've got a better tip for you. Get some hose like this. Now these are perfect, you don't have to go out and buy them. What you're going to do is put it over the plug there, and we're going to put it in like that. So all you do is wind it backwards a little bit until it clicks, and that means it's found the thread. You just twist. Once you've twisted a few times, you pull up on this, and if it comes off, it means the plug's seated. Then you can use this, and you have no fear, or should I say danger, of them damaging the plug. Now, with spark plugs, when you tighten them up, well, you don't tighten them up. You want to put it in till it's seated, I will say, so you feel it stop, which I will show you. And then you just want to give it a good firm sort of twist to make sure it's in. So that's there. I'm just going to take this out to make sure it's there. So that is, it stops there. So if I go back, it stops. So what I'm going to do now is give it a little, that's it. Doesn't need to be any tighter than that. That's tight enough. Then I'm going to put this back in for now. I'm not going to click in just yet. Right, repeat. Right, so that's the plugs done. I'm just going to have a bit of a quick check, make sure there's nothing untoward. Stuff like making sure the connectors are all okay, there's no frayed wires. Is everything okay on the head? I don't need to check the head bolts. I mean, you could do if you want, but I don't need to. Are all these hoses okay? Are all these circuits okay? Is there anything on there that I should be worried about, basically? All looks good. So give these a bit of a click back in. Right, next. Right, so that's spark plugs done. Next, I've got to do the fuel filter, which on this bike is inside the tank, which is in the spray booth drying. So I'm going to leave that for now. I will re-edit that back in at a later date. So next, it's the coolant and coolant level. Let's get cracking. Right, so after the spark plugs, I needed an easy one. Coolant level. Oh, do this cold. So coolant obviously keeps everything cool, which means it gets very hot. Now, when water is under pressure, the boiling point increases, and I believe in this it's about 120 degrees Celsius. So if it's hot and you take this off, it instantly boils and gushes out in your face. Yeah, that's him. Shine a torch in. And what we're looking for is not just the height, but the cleanliness, is it orange? Is it rusty basically? Is it the clean? Now this is deionized water, so in theory it shouldn't rust. I don't like to use that, but it's new, and I'm not going to mess. And then we just got to check the coolant tank. In here we have indication of low, which is there, high, which is there. Now if we shine our torch, we can see it's here, and the low mark is a little higher, so we need to put a little bit in there. Right then, so get that bung out, we don't want to lose that. We've got the funnel, which is a terrible fit. So we'll hold that there. And we've got deionized water. So what I want to do is make sure I get in the middle. I don't want to go too high because I don't trust the level markers. I won't lie. This is going to be miserable one-handed. Come on, lads. A little trickle, it's on the small tub, and perfect. So just a small amount. Now, if you've bled the system or you've got any air bubbles in, it's a totally different process. This is just topping up. Make sure that's in nice and tight. Just check obviously the hoses. It's clamped in, good quality hoses as well. So now that's done, while we're down here, obviously check hoses, everything. Check your radiator, make sure there's no leaks. And I've already mentioned the brake lines I think are rubbing, so I'm going to sort those out. Make sure your hoses have no issues. I mean, there's a little bit of something there, but nothing to get worried about. Make sure your Jubilee clips are fresh, not rusty. It's a common one as well, these blowing off. And when you get coolant on the track, people fall off, so people will thank you for doing this one. Right, we're nearly there, guys. And also, that's deionized water. I don't normally use it. It came with the bag. The guy gave me the bottle, so why not? I normally use coolant 100%. I don't mix it with water. Right, so fork clamp bolts. These there now. To remove these things, there's like a little push clip, which, to be honest, you can usually just pull the fucking thing out. Oh, light. There we go. Pull that out. There we go. These are 23 Newton meters, and I did this side off camera because the angle was a bit shit. And that was okay, but one was really, really loose. Look at that. That's the fucking fork bolts, guys. Right. Bottom and top. Nice. Clean. So brake hose banjo bolt, size of U 14. Excellent. And the other side. Excellent. Yes, 12. There we go. So swing arm pivot nut, not bolt. The bolt's 15, the nut is 100 Newton meters. Now I'm going to gamble that this isn't loose because they never are. Told you. Right, ladies and gents, that's the end of the video really. There's a couple of other little bits, so the fuel filter, a couple of other bolts, but I think you've got the gist of it now. Excuse me. I'm going to do another video that is the setup of your bike, so that is more major adjustments, so like adjusting the actual clutch itself, the rear sets, setting up your suspension, which people think is a dark art, but once you learn what they essentially rebound, compression, dampening, high-low, once you actually learn what they mean and what they do and how to understand how the bike reacts when you do something with those, you can adjust your suspension fairly quickly and dial it in for yourself and the track you go to. So that, look out for that one. Setting a baseline is essentially all you need to do, and then work from that. There's another document that I will give you which you can take to your track day that lets you record the bike setup, so tyre PSI, etc, etc. I really hope this was useful and you found something from it. I know that if one person follows this video, then I can guarantee I've made that person's track day life much better, because you're going to have less issues on track. Obviously, when you go on a track day, you're not necessarily going to take a 36mm socket and a torque wrench with you, so if you do have any issues on track, it's too late sometimes. But most of the things that happen on track we've covered on here. There are unforeseen events that you can't legislate for, but hey ho. So as always, please leave any feedback, good or bad, in the comments. Tom, shout out to you for every comment so far. Really appreciate your time taken to watch the videos, and I'm glad you like them. Anything you want me to look at, cover, etc, fire away. I do read them all, and I really appreciate them. These videos are for all you guys, so yeah, I'm glad you watched them. If you didn't watch them, why would I bother doing it? So yeah, next time hopefully you'll get to see it on track. Thanks for watching, and if you want to see more, obviously subscribe.